Any update on the Inflation Reduction Act? I know you've been taking your time.
So as you know, we don't have comment. We're going to wait to see what comes out of the parliamentarian process, and she's reviewing the text. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That reporter had the utter gall to ask a senator to weigh in on the most important piece of legislation being considered, and got that little look from Kyrsten Sinema. And that's honestly the most polite I've seen her be to a reporter in literally years. So thank you, Senator, for being so open-minded. But anyway, we are waiting to find out what's gonna happen with her. And some dribs and drabs of insider information is starting to come out. So we're gonna sift through that and see what we can learn. But in anticipation of that, the national debate about her role is already making me so angry on a daily basis. Here is a front page of an article from the Washington Post that at first glance might not seem that bad. Democrats weigh reducing new taxes to get Sinema's vote for climate bill. That's already terrible that you would have to do that. But under it says, the senator from Arizona, a centrist fiscal hawk, previously raised concerns about plans to raise federal tax laws. That's what she is. She's just a centrist fiscal hawk. She is always concerned about excess spending, which is why she holds up military budgets in the same way that she holds up climate bills and all that. She definitely wants to reduce all of our spending, not just the spending that's inconvenient to corporations. And a centrist, first of all, she has basically the exact same position on corporate taxes as every Republican, and yes, a lot of Democrats in this country. That's not centrist, that's not in the center. She's not agreeing with the vast majority of people. She is a radical pro-corporate senator. But the Washington Post is there with their invented words, centrist and moderate, ready to just dole it out to whoever upholds the current economic status quo. And raised concerns about plans. Okay, but you're a journalist, okay? Whoever, let's see, Tony Rahm and Jeff Stein, who does some good work, by the way, raised concerns. Could you maybe get into why she's raising concerns, what her actual concerns might be? Because I got news for you. The words she's saying aren't the only relevant facts. The way she's voted, what she's obstructed, the money she's taken, the promises she's gone back on, the former positions of hers that now seem laughable by comparison. The fact that she was a Green Party member who now just might tank the only climate legislation likely to happen this decade. All of that seems worth talking about. Now we're gonna dive into some of her concerns and what might happen to this bill. But Jordan, what are you thinking about the process so far?
On that point, calling her a centrist fiscal hawk, and this happens so often in media when talking about people who block bills or legislation that could help people. It's always framed as this fiscal responsibility thing. And here you have a bill and a proposal that would implement a 15% corporate minimum tax. And there are so many, I think there were dozens and dozens, maybe a couple hundred of companies that had effectively a 0% tax rate in 2020. And when you have those same companies, many of them S&P 500 companies, with CEO to median worker pay ratios of thousands to one or several hundred to one. The average on the S&P 500 is 324 to one. We just found out because the AFL-CIO did a report on this. But the median worker pay at some of these big, these giant corporations is well below the poverty line. And those same people are relying on government programs to make ends meet. Why is that not factored in? When those companies aren't paying their fair share, when those companies aren't paying workers a fair living wage, when they then have to turn around and rely on government programs to make ends meet, why is that not factored into the conversation? Because I would say these people who are blocking these proposals and then pushing those workers onto government programs to survive aren't being fiscally responsible. Because the easy solution there is just make those giant companies who are posting record profits pay their fair share, not have the government subsidize their workers' living conditions.
Yeah, it's insane that maybe we'll get the 15% minimum tax rate. Like I know, I'm sure that if you were to look, the New York Times has probably done some good work, laying out, as I know you talk about constantly, the absolutely absurd 0 or negative tax rate of some of these corporations and billionaires. But like the fact that she gets to dictate the conversation around this, no, those facts should be dictating. You should not be able to read an update about this process, about the IRA, without seeing the absolute economic murder that these corporations and wealthy individuals are getting away with. And that is how you should be armed as you go into sentences like, Sinema has concerns with the structure of the 15% corporate minimum book tax and whether the burden could get passed down to employees. Yes, it's such a burden for corporations making billions in profits to be taxed at 15% for the first time ever. Look, trying to whatever extent structure it so that you can stop that from happening would be great. But you need to be like, and I'm saying to the journalists here, her supposed concerns about it being passed down, if that results in her not allowing it to happen, maybe you should be a little bit suspicious about whether that was actually her concern in the first place or whether it's a convenient ruse. Anyway, she supposedly supports cracking down on tax avoidance, but has long voiced her opposition to closing the carried interest loophole. So what is the carried interest loophole? Well, we know that it's a thing that a lot of people don't have to deal with, so we try to define it as often as we can. Carried interest is the percentage of profits that hedge fund managers receive from lucrative investments. But that compensation is taxed at a lower capital gains rate that maxes out at 23.8%, doesn't face a higher income tax rate like most Americans pay on wages from their job. And look, I'm not an economist, I'm not an expert on this, but I would say what is carried interest? It is a term that was made up to confuse you. It's money they earned. It's their income, that's all it is. Now it's fancy pants income for wealthy people who wear suits to work, I guess. That's great income. You dum-dums make stupid income. That's real income that we're gonna tax at a super high rate. But if you're super rich, then we're gonna call it something else and make it seem really arcane and unapproachable. That's why these terms exist. It is technically true, it's carried interest, but it's also a propaganda tactic to make you think, I don't understand taxes. I don't understand tax reform. Maybe they could simplify it at some point, but in a way that I can't understand. So they're getting taxed way less on their income than you, despite the fact that they make 10, 50, 100 times much as you. That's the way that it basically works. She says that provision, actually taxing them at the same rate as any random person would for their income, could undermine economic competitiveness. That's what it is. I think that's her concerns. I think wealthy people have sent her to Washington because of abstract concerns about economic competitiveness, not their bank accounts. They would never be so crass and selfish to worry about that. It's probably something abstract that floats around that you can read about on Wikipedia. It's probably that she's mostly concerned about, Jordan.
It's obviously bogus, but this is just a Republican talking point. And it's even funnier that it's coming from a Democrat like way outside of Wall Street. Like it's not Schumer saying this. It's not Gillibrand. It's a senator in Arizona, as if she's like deeply invested in the profitability of like Wall Street financial firms. That's just like it never stops being confusing. But this is ultimately a Republican talking point, and there's nothing like the thing is what people don't understand is a lot of those trades. And a lot of that money making is done through algorithms and computers. There's nothing that no increased profits is going to create new jobs or innovate new technologies or anything like that. They already have what they need. They're just trying to maximize it as long as they can. And I would argue that lowering the personal tax rate and increasing their tax rate for working people at home, if they had a lower tax burden, and if they didn't have to pay as much as they had in taxes, you would see actually more investment and more creativity and more development. Because that would free up a ton of disposable income for people to either start their own company or start their own business or start a passion project, something they really care about, something they want to do on the side. And they had a little bit more money at home and it could stretch a little bit further. They could make ends meet and they had room in their life to do something they cared about. You would see a much better society than if we taxed a bunch of Wall Street cokeheads a little bit less.
Exactly, no, 100%. And look, what do those Wall Street cokeheads have like in their side to bring to this fight? Endless money, literally endless. It's just made up. They just put numbers in a computer, and that's how much money they have. And they have the media. They have the Washington Post. They have look at these quotes. Look at how utterly insulting this is. So first of all, just briefly, let's acknowledge that on Tuesday, Sinema had a call with Arizona's Chamber of Commerce. Did she have a call with you? Do you live in Arizona? You're an activist in Arizona. Did she have a call with you? I doubt it. I really, really doubt it. But she talked to them. And then there's this, and I think this is amazing. So The private equity industry, which has contributed heavily to Sinema, so Axios is acknowledging that, is lobbying her heavily on shooting down the carried interest portion. So the carried interest, remember, that's about the whole like investment income, blah, 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 getting taxed at a lower rate. Quote, I remember last year, she was hearing feedback from small business owners concerned about the potential implications of any tax policy changes and how it might affect their capital investment streams. There is not a small business in America that's worried about their carried interest going forward. It's not like a mom and pop bakery is like, we have all these massive investments in pork bellies on Wall Street, and I'm a little bit worried about what might happen if there's a small increase in the amount that I'm taxed on it. They are spitting in your face with sentences like that. That's all it is. Small business no longer means literally anything. A small, like a small hedge fund, in the $1 to $2 trillion range, they're worried about their investment cash flow. Jordan, it's not a world that I necessarily understand, but I do understand when someone's insulting me, and I'm getting a big whiff of insult off of this.
They know that the media is just going to serve as a megaphone for these false concerns too. Like you pointed it out, they're not that money those small businesses are making, they're paying a different tax rate and they're operating under a different structure than Wall Street. This only benefits multimillionaires and billionaires. That's it. That's who makes them, and Wall Street firms. That's who makes their money this way. That's who makes their money on the market, not mom and pop cheese shops in Arizona. So it's absurd that this is still working. They know they can just go to access-oriented outlets like Axios or Washington Post and launder these quotes into the media, and that becomes the narrative. And the Chamber of Commerce, people really need to see through what that is. That is a business interest front group. I know a lot of viewers understand that, but she also was with them a few months ago, speaking at one of their quarterly or monthly events, and pledged not to support anything that would increase corporate taxes at all. And that got a robust round of applause from the crowd. But that's largely a Republican group who she's speaking to and who she's making that pledge to. And it shows who she's serving, whose interests she's serving in Congress. And that's corporate, capitalist, and Republican interests.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.